right, so we're going to start and finish chapter 4 today. Thursday will be for review for the exam that will be posted 4 p.m. on Friday. Natasha, you just jumped up out of nowhere. That was so funny looking. And then it'll close the same time as always, 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. I have not made it, but it typically runs between 50 and 65 questions, all multiple choice. So yeah, let me address that one thing. So I don't know. I think it was Mimi that brought it up, and someone else did too. That one question, because the program moves the questions around. When the answer was E, it was A and B. A and B moved, so it no longer was the correct answer. So that's what happened. So what does that mean? It means that I have to be careful not to pick questions or load questions that have a format like that, and to know that like it can only be one answer regardless of how it's being moved around. So that's why that happened. Does anyone else have a question about the quiz? Kaylee.
Oh, no, I told you about that.
Oh, it was you. Okay. Okay. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That's right. Yeah.
I have a question about the exam real quick.
Yeah.
So there's no 4th chapter quiz, right? Is this going to be a lump of the 1 through 4 exam?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to start sharing. Sex and gender differences. This is always an interesting one. And why is this an interesting one? Why is this a topic of contention?
Because someone who appears one way can say my identity is, and it has to be valid, and some people have an issue with that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Is because when we have sex and gender differences, we are essentially generalizing to a gender or a sex. Does that mean that there aren't sex and gender differences? No, it doesn't. There are, but it's very contentious because people do not like, myself included, I do not like being stereotyped. I do not, and nobody should be stereotyped. So this woman, who, right? She has the genetic makeup of XY, so she's genetically a male. So we're going to talk about how that happens. How could someone? Oh, you know what? Remember that one question on your quiz? A lot of you missed that one question about having 22, or was that abnormal? Was it this class? Having 22 pairs of chromosomes and one sex pair of chromosomes, and why that's different, why it's not 23 pairs.
It's abnormal.
That was abnormal? How do you know that? You're not in abnormal. You just remember the
I wasn't it last time. I wasn't in the spring.
Spring or fall?
Spring. Last year.
You sure it was spring?
Yeah, because I didn't have you in the fall, right? I didn't have you for a whole semester. Wait, maybe it was the fall.
It was the fall. That's why I cannot believe you remember that.
It's the fall. It's the fall. Yes, because I had allergy.
Yep. Yeah, I'm impressed.
I remember that because I think I was trying to argue with you on that because we used to have those sessions where we.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, you guys got me good though. Wow. You'd always get 2 or 3 in there. Yeah, I know. Okay. So, genes and hormones guide sex development. So every normal developing individual possesses a pair of sex chromosomes in the nucleus of every cell of the body. We always get one X from mom and an X or a Y from dad. And this will then determine the sex of the child. So XX female, XY male. Okay. Now, there was a study conducted by Alfred Yost. And what he had done is he had taken a pregnant rabbit and opened her up while she was pregnant, took the fetus, each fetus out, and scraped and removed the gonadal tissue. Okay? And so it says remove the gonadal tissue from the fetal rabbits. What does this mean? By removing the gonadal tissue, preventing the gonadal tissue from developing into either ovaries or testes, they all came out female. But what does this mean?
Wait, what?
Yeah. Okay.
The gonadal tissues decide the gender of the rabbit.
Okay. Okay. That's a really good question. It doesn't decide the gender. It decides the morphological sex. And what does that mean? Morphology is talking about physical structure. So what it meant was none of those rabbits, none of them developed penises. They all developed vaginas, and they all had fallopian tubes and a uterus and all of that. They didn't have ovaries because they scraped that off. So what does that mean?
Like the basic anatomy is female, or
That's what I was going to say.
Okay.
They can't have kids then.
They cannot have offspring, correct? Okay,
And what-
and
what-
so I'm going to change your answer a little bit, Jesse. I'm going to say I had the word, the default is female. That's what I meant. Yep, the default is female.
I couldn't think of.
So he determined that males develop as a result of genes that trigger development of testes. The testes then release hormones to masculinize the rest of the body. By removing the gonadal tissue, it prevented the genetic males from developing testes. And as a result, without the testes, they couldn't secrete the hormones that were necessary for changing the external morphology of the genitalia, as well as the reproductive organs internally. So to become female, it's a passive process. Nothing extra needs to happen. To become male, it's an active process. Many things need to happen. This is where we said that the female anatomy is kind of complex, and the reason why is because with a male's penis, you have all the stuff right there, you're good. But you take all three of those functions and separate them for a female. That's where it becomes complex anatomically. But developmentally, it's more complex to become a male. So the testes and the ovaries develop from the same structures. These are called genital ridges. After about 5 weeks, that's when the differentiation of the gonads begin. So in the first 5 weeks of our development, you take any fetus out. Well, actually, at that point, they wouldn't be a fetus. They'd be an embryo. You take that out and you look at it, whether they're a rabbit or whether they're a human or whatever. Well, I'm going to take this all back for a second. I apologize. This is specific to humans. Humans have a longer gestational period than humans do. So it'd take less than 5 weeks for a rabbit. But for a human, they are indiscernible appearance-wise for the first 5 weeks until there's something called an SRY gene that is located on the Y chromosome if the individual received it from the father. And then that SRY gene kicks in and says, you know what, take that tissue and turn it into testes. In the absence of that Y gene, in the absence of that SRY gene on the Y chromosome, it just naturally by default turns into ovaries. So it isn't until the 5th week that we can look at an individual begin to change if it's going to be male. The only other way to know is by taking blood, getting a genetic profile. So the male and the female reproductive tracts develop from different precursors. This is where it gets a little something. See, our genitalia comes from the same tissue. Our gonads come from the same tissue. Our testes and ovaries, those. But our internal plumbing, our reproductive plumbing, does not. So I'm looking at Alyssa, looking at Angela, Jesse, every single one in this room, if we develop normally, every single one in this class, for the first 5 weeks or so, we had both male and female plumbing. We all had epididymis. We all had a pair of oviducts. We all had all that. It wasn't developed well, but I mean, it was there. Okay? So what happens is the male plumbing, we call the Wolffian ducts, and the female plumbing, we call the Mullerian ducts. And this includes, for the male, it's going to be the vas deferens, the epididymis, all these things that are necessary for the male plumbing. And for the Mullerian ducts, we're talking about the fallopian tubes. Okay? So we both possess it for the first 6 weeks or so. The male has to do two things. It has to both eliminate the female plumbing and maintain its male plumbing. So it has to send out a hormone from the testes that says, eat away those fallopian tubes. Get rid of those, metabolize them, be gone. But at the same time, it has to send out a separate hormone, testosterone, that maintains the male plumbing. Now, a female, notice now, here, those are two active processes. The male has to send out what's called anti-Mullerian hormone, also known as a Mullerian inhibiting substance, also known as Mullerian inhibiting hormone. It sends out that hormone to metabolize, to break down and eliminate the female plumbing, active process. And it also, the testes have to also secrete testosterone to bind to the male plumbing, to maintain it, to strengthen it, so it doesn't go anywhere. Jesse, do you have a question? Okay. So both are active processes. Now, for a female, without the development of testes, because they lack the Y chromosome, which would locate onto it the SRY gene that would turn their gonadal tissue into testes, secrete these, they by default develop ovaries. Ovaries don't have to do anything. The male plumbing would wither away on its own. And the female plumbing just keeps going on its own. That's it. Because if the male's testes didn't produce and release anti-Mullerian hormone, he would develop with both male and female plumbing. Okay, good. Alyssa's getting it. I see that. I see it, man. I see it. You're with me. Okay. So the male and the female external genitalia develop from the same precursors. The gonadal tissue, same precursor. But our plumbing, we have both sets of. Just that if you're male, one of them has to be getting rid of, the other one has to be maintained. If you're female, the male plumbing would just wither away on its own in the absence of testosterone. So you can see at 7 weeks of age, we look identical. Sorry for not notifying you earlier, but I have to leave the Zoom today. Did I watch the recognition and apologize again? No worries, buddy boy. All right, we'll see you on Thursday for review when you do leave, okay? Okay. Good. So you can see at about 10 weeks, you start to see things changing between the female and the male. You can see that the labia majora here, labia majora, and you see the labia minora here. You can see the labia majora here have become together fused to create the sac, the scrotum. It's the same tissue. But in the absence of testosterone, it becomes this. In the presence of testosterone and 5-alpha dihydrotestosterone, it becomes this. Okay? So, unlike the internal reproductive tracts, the external genitalia in males and females arise from the same homologous set of structures. I'm repeating myself, but, you know. So I'm not going to ask you to know what these things are, like the urogenital sinus, the cloaca, the urethral folds. It's fine. You don't need to know all that, okay? But I want you to understand the idea that we have the same stuff the same things, but because different hormones are not present or present, it causes things to change, which is the job of a hormone. It's to act on tissue. It's to bind to tissue and have some effect. In this case, the effect is to change its shape. Now, the gonads descend during development. Now, we're talking about males and females. For both males and females, they start near the kidneys, but by the 10th week, they end up near the pelvic region. Females then keep them there for the most part. Males move much farther, and eventually by the 6th to 7th month in the womb, they're located in the scrotum. Between 2 and 5% of newborn males have one or both testes undescended. If this persists, it results in a decrease in fertility and an increase in testicular chances of cancer. So yes, surgery is best to be performed by the age of 2 years. In my family, I have 4 brothers and a sister. 3 of my brothers had testes undescended and had to have surgical, like bringing them down. It was my brother and I, who are the one that were 11 months apart. We're the only 2 that didn't have to have that done. Why am I telling you this? Because my oldest brother, where they had waited until he was like old, until I think he was, let me think, I want to say like 6, 7, 8, something like that. He ended up developing testicular cancer. And he had to have it removed. And the one that was cancerous, and the other one was sterile. Okay? So my brother cannot have children. He's adopted children. Actually, that's not really true. I take that back. It's not adopted, but he has children. Let's put it that way. Yeah. They did, not that you need to know this. He'd probably be upset if I told you, but it's important for you to know when you have boys, okay? It's important for you to know. That's why I'm telling you, not just to share. Give me a second. A lot of words on this page. I would probably, if I'd ask you something, I would say something about how I wouldn't ask you to know what the weeks are like that. I don't think so. Or the months at which things start to happen. I would just want you to know the basic idea that both of our gonads start above the kidneys, drop down, but it keeps going further for the males. And if you don't have them drop entirely into the scrotum, they need to have surgery in the first 2 years. Otherwise, they become infertile and cancerous. Okay. Puberty is sexual maturation. The gonads begin secreting large loads of hormones that are necessary to sustain reproductive life. We'll continue this in chapter 10, but for now, no. But what I want you to think about or look at is puberty is sexual maturation. Maturation. We talked about that, what that means, that word, what that means, maturation.
No.
Okay, so to mature.
I don't know if we talked about it in years.
But, okay, to mature means to fulfill your genetic destiny. Yeah, okay, so Alyssa remembers that. Okay. It's like hair color, eye color, baldness, height, weight, anything that is genetically determined that can be environmentally altered. Don't get me wrong. These things can be altered. I don't know about your eye color. Well, I guess it could if you do something to it. But...
Question, please.
Yeah. Yes.
Can a baby be sexually immature? Means that he has like default in his body or her body or something?
Can a baby be sexually immature?
Yeah.
Like underdeveloped?
Yes. Something like this?
Yes. And we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yes, we are. We're going to talk about the masculinization of female genitalia. We're going to talk about the under-masculinization of male genitalia. That's exactly right. And it's all dependent on, Mimi, you tell me the answer. What does this depend on?
The chromosomes from the parents.
Okay, that's true. What after then, though? What do they determine?
The tissues that we were talking about.
The tissues, right. And what do the tissues become?
I don't remember the name.
They become our gonadal tissue. They become
Yes,
our
gonadal. Yes.
Okay. And what are the two kinds of gonads? What do girls have? What do boys have? That's okay. Our gonads are our glands that produce sex steroid hormones and our gametes, which means our sex cells, our sperm and our ova. So what I was getting at eventually was what determines hypermasculinization in females and hypomasculinization in males is the presence or lack thereof testosterone. Okay. Now the brain also differentiates sexually. A man's body and brain is on average 10% larger than a woman's. The left and the right hemispheres are the same size for women. The right hemisphere is slightly larger than the left for men. Men will use their right amygdala for emotional memory when women may use their left amygdala. And this is a good one. Men produce 52% more serotonin than women, which explains the relative differences. One of the explanations for the relative differences in depression, because depression is not just chemically based. Okay, it's also experiential. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know why they produce so much more serotonin, or is that just like no one knows why?
Okay. All right. When you have something like this, you have to find a function. That's what you're asking. What's the purpose? What's the why for this? Why do we have these differences? And when we ask that question, we should always go back in time and think, well, how would that have benefited our ancestors?
I don't know. I don't get that.
Yeah. Well, because we
At all.
haven't.
Men would be able to handle more stress to be able to hunt and protect. So they'd be able to deal with those harder, more traumatic stresses, potentially more easily with more serotonin in their brain.
I thought it was like the other way around, like the girls having to like do everything. Like they had to do everything. You think they would want to be happier, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, we do want to be happier. Thank you.
Okay.
right? Because like the girls are made to do everything. Like the guys just had to work.
Nowadays,
That's hard
it's
too, but
I don't know that I agree that our ancestors, the females, did everything.
no, not like that, but like more mentally, like or emotionally, like taking care of the children and stuff like that. You think they would want to have more? I'm just saying, like their work, like the men's work wasn't like so like draining in their emotionally, like they were doing physical labor.
Mm-hmm.
So that
So
was
something to help us be more emotionally stable to deal with the emotional
yeah. I guess
tasks.
so.
Well, when you have a stress like an everyday stressor, like children and handling things at home, but then you have like traumatic stresses, like going to war and fighting things,
Yeah.
that can be something because of PTSD and the effects that PTSD have on the brain. That can be something so detrimental that I think that could possibly explain the difference in serotonin, because like where we had these everyday stressors, that was like more like a small level everyday regulation. The men were having to deal with PTSD on a regular basis, essentially.
Yeah, that's true.
blood, gore, fighting for their life, being, seriously, their safety being threatened. So.
Mhm.
That is something I had never thought of. Someone wants to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of crazy how they produce more serotonin when, like, stereotypically guys are supposed to be angrier and not as happy and everything as women are. That just kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. Well, that's also very good. Quiet baby. Okay. So I love this. This is good. You guys are really, really making me happy here.
Yeah, I love when you make that face. It's the best.
Good. Yeah. Oh, this is what I promised this class would be like eventually. You'll see. Okay. What's the meaning of life?
To procreate and keep on living.
Okay. The meaning of life is to make more of us or help those who are, right?
Yep.
Okay. So anything that increases the odds for making more of us is going to be kind of strengthened. Any characteristic or trait is going to be doubled down. So in a little bit, we're going to find out that a woman's estrogen that's released from her ovaries binds to serotonin receptors. What does that mean? What does that mean? All right, let's do this before we go to that question. When is a woman's estrogen levels the highest?
Is it when she's pregnant?
Nope.
Or PMS.
Nope.
Not PMS, but ovulation.
Ovulation.
Yes,
Yeah.
ovulation.
Ovulation. So ovulation is when she's released an egg and it's hanging out in the fallopian tubes. Now she has a heightened sex drive and she's in a good mood. You know what estrogen also helps with? Memory. So let's get this straight. Before our ancestors had developed language, somehow nature, over time, had developed to make women less content until it was time to make a baby and then remember who it was with.
That is so messed up.
That's one explanation. That's one explanation. The other one that Alyssa brought up and you all kind of went on with about the different division of labor between men and women, that maybe it also aided in literally the male's survival in coping with stressors. Yeah, that could be it too. I never thought of that. That could be a part of it, if not all of it. I don't know. Nobody knows. We have to guess why these things are different. We can only know certain pieces of the puzzle and try to put them together and go, wait a minute, this makes sense. This is going to help us survive. Look at those later. Okay. Any other questions?
Not yet.
Comments? Okay. So chromosomal anomalies will affect growth and fertility. So a normal developing human will have one pair of sex chromosomes, an XX or an XY. Every now and again, something happens where they develop a third or even a fourth, or even they're lacking one. Okay. And so they have different syndromes, 2X chromosomes and a Y, 3X, and it's called Klinefelters. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to ask you to know what they're called. I'm not going to ask you to know what the chromosomal makeup is. I'm not going to ask you to know what percentage of them exist. Know that it's relatively rare. But what I would ask you to know, so you can see, where is it? Here are some of the physical characteristics that develop with having an extra X or two extra X's. I'm not going to ask you to know that. Typically, what you'll find is there's something related to the torso, and there's something related to thinking or cognition. Okay? Again, something related to the torso, and here we go, cognitive deficits.
What is XO?
It means it's lacking the other one.
Oh, it's just X, just one X.
Yeah. Again, here's another one, lower intelligence, cognitive deficits. Again, mild cognitive deficits. So what is it I want you to know? What is it that I might ask you? Is that if there's any deviation from an XX or an XY, there's an increased likelihood of having, a developmental delay or a cognitive deficit, an intellectual deficit. And there's typically going to be some sort of
So that means that our gender or our sex is like innately linked to our intelligence.
It means,
like down to the fundamental level.
That's a great question, and I was hoping one of you would ask that, or I was just going to mention it. See, almost nothing there, I should say, that's not right at all. Very, very, very few things about us are the result of a gene or two. Very few things. Our sex is actually one of them. But when it comes to intelligence, it's polygenic. So if it was intelligence in total, you would see severe cognitive deficits, not mild or moderate. But yes, to answer your question, yes, it has an impact, it has an influence, it has a say. Our sex chromosomes have a say in how we develop cognitively. It has something to say about it. Okay. Now, I want you to know what this is. The gonads or genitals may be sexually ambiguous, meaning unclear, not sure. For example, intersexuality. Okay, like gonadal intersexuality, androgen insensitivity syndrome, and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. We're going to go through each one of these. Okay, gonadal intersexuality, formerly known as true hermaphroditism. These individuals will identify themselves as women, but they contain tissues of both male and female gonads. And yes, the answer is this is determined by excessive amounts of testosterone or not enough. What they're pointing, this little arrow here, is they're pointing at a sinus, a cavity, that would be a vaginal opening. But you can see the labia is partially fused to make a scrotum. And you can clearly see an enlarged clitoris or a very underdeveloped penis. Androgen insensitivity syndrome. When we say androgens, we're talking about testosterone. We're talking about that 5-alpha dihydrotestosterone. Well, these individuals are genetically male. They have testes. Do not have ovaries. But if you look at them, every one of them has a vulva. Okay, that's okay. All right, we will, I'll be posting this lecture right after class, okay, in YouTube. and we'll review on Thursday. Bye, Mimi. Okay, thanks. Bye. Yep, okay, bye. All right. So what happened was these males developed the way they were supposed to, the testes. The SRY gene was there. It was on the Y chromosome on the 23rd pair. It was there. But you know what it didn't develop? Functional receptors for testosterone. They lacked functional testosterone receptors. So you can have as much testosterone running around in the system, but if it has nothing to bind to, if it doesn't bind to the genital tissue, it won't change the genitalia. So they all came out female, but they have testes. So it says here, they're insensitive to the effects of the androgens, testosterone. They lack the reproductive tracts of both sexes. Why? Because the testosterone can't do its job on the Wolffian system for the male plumbing, so that withers away on its own, just like a female's would. But the AMH, the anti-Müllerian hormone, that still works. So the interior female plumbing is now going to be gone too. They appear female. You can see they develop breasts because the testes secrete estrogens also. And they have testes. They have a very short, narrow vagina. Now we're talking about the actual canal. They do have a clitoris. They do have a urethral opening. They look, by all accounts, female from the external genitalia part. But they lack a uterus. They lack the fallopian tubes. All of that. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we know by any studies or like them saying, do they feel more masculine? Do they feel more feminine? Do they identify as, you said they identify as women? Or was that the other side?
That's great. That's great. Okay, so the one prior to this one, the gonadal intersexuality, they will often identify themselves as women because that's how their parents wanted them to identify because it was so small. So like, look at, we'll just do some reconstructive surgery. That's usually what they do. Okay. Here, oh, that's a great question. Okay. So we're going to learn a little bit, so it's going to be redundant. Do you want to wait or do you want me to tell you right now because we're on it?
Tell us right now while we're on it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the testes secrete, just like the ovaries do, testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone, but just a lot more testosterone than the females, especially during puberty. But anyway, this happens both in the womb and when we hit puberty. Okay, those are the two major things. There's what we call the organizational effects, meaning you're being organized in the womb to be male or being organized to be female. And then when we hit puberty, it's called the activational. Now we set it up to be male or female. We set it up good. Now once you hit puberty, let's activate it. Let's do it. Let's become sexually mature and let's become, what we're going to be. All right. In the womb, when all the testes in these androgen sensitivity syndrome individuals, when the testes are secreting all the testosterone, great, it's going everywhere. It's going everywhere the blood goes. It doesn't just go to the genitalia. It goes everywhere the blood goes. And so later in this lecture, we're going to talk about what masculinizing effects of the brain there are. That testosterone gets to the brain and it masculinizes the brain as well. So Kaylee, you tell me, if they lack receptors in the brain to be masculinized, what are they going to feel?
More like a woman?
Man, feel like a woman. Yeah, they're going to feel feminine. Okay. Now we have, okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay. It does.
Okay, good. All right. Now we have something, the third one, called congenital. And that means congenital actually doesn't have anything to do with your genitals, believe it or not. Congenital means you're born with it. Adrenal hyperplasia, like congenital heart failure, that kind of thing. Okay. Congenital means you're born with it. Adrenal hyperplasia, it means hyperplasia means hyperactive. Adrenal means adrenal gland. So born with a hyperactive adrenal gland, the adrenal glands secrete testosterone. So here you have a female, genetic female, whose adrenal glands are overactive, and it masculinizes their genitalia. So we can detect this. It says now we can treat this prenatally. We can detect whether it's a male or female, and we can detect testosterone levels in the womb and go, whoa, 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 whoa. This is the genetic sex of female, but it's going to be born with what's going to be appearing to be in intersexuality. What do you want to do? And parents would be like, block it. Because no offense to anyone out there, most parents who have children want to have grandchildren. And so when you have this condition, it makes it almost impossible to have grandchildren. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's a good question. I'm looking right at Tommy on this one too. Right at you, bruh. Tell me, should a parent intervene with that?
I was just thinking about that,
I knew you
and
were.
that's a tough one because, man, that's tough.
Yes, it is.
It's hard for me to say because I don't have kids, but I'm trying to put myself in those shoes, and I think like, okay, if this is the way that nature is deciding it should be, then I should let it be that way. But then, what about my partner? Like, what do they feel?
Or what about the child?
And what about the child? And like, I don't know what they're gonna want to be when they get older, how they're gonna identify. And I honestly, I don't have an answer. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't eat, well, I do for myself personally.
Right.
And I would feel for my child.
Mhm.
So I think I would have some sort of intervention done.
Yeah.
This way you can avoid any surgeries that they may want to go through later in life.
True. Yeah.
They come out feeling normal.
Right.
That's my opinion. Just
Mhm.
mine. But there are ethical concerns, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Totally.
there's some people who believe, some people have spirituality or religious beliefs where they think, well, this is the way God intended it.
Mhm.
So I respect that too.
Yeah.
I ain't got no God. No, I'm just kidding. Let's go. Here we go. All right. So gender is a central aspect of personhood. Gender, the collection of psychological traits that differ between males and females. Let's say that again. The collection of psychological traits that differ between males and females. Our gender identity is a person's subjective, me, just mine, feeling or sense of being male or female. 99.9% of people give an answer that is similar to their genital anatomy. When they don't agree, they're considered transgendered. Now, 99.9. Does that seem high? It does to me. I would have thought there'd be a higher population of transgenderism.
It seems like
Well,
there is.
even if you do identify, like me personally, like I prefer the term they them. Like I don't see gender norms as like a thing necessary. It causes more fighting than anything. And I think that we all have a mix of masculine and feminine energies and traits about us. But what I don't put on any paperwork when I'm asked is that I put female, just because why even explain it? It's like such a hot topic right now that everyone just wants to beat to death, that like I'm just one of those people that feels like, why even, like why even waste my time wasting my breath and explaining about all of that when truly it doesn't even matter. So like, and then you have people who have family that are vehemently against them, feeling that way, so they hide it. So I mean, the 99.9% of people answer that.
Yeah.
Is it true? Are they
Right. Got it. Yep. Is it an accurate number because of people not reporting honestly?
Mhm.
Tommy, what were you saying?
For me,
I thought you were saying something too. If you don't have
I
any,
am gonna say something. Yeah.
well then say it.
I'm gonna say it. So
Do it.
I understand the argument that your sex is your sex based on your genitals, and your gender is how you identify and perceive yourself.
Time out. It's based
Yeah.
on your genetics.
Based what? Oh, the sex, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, not the genitals, the
Right.
genetics. Okay, got you.
Good.
And then like I'm hearing this other argument about like you can't change your gender, and I'm just confused about that. Like what are the facts, and what argument do they back up?
Okay. So
I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
yeah. Can you hang on to that for a second?
Mhm.
Because I wanna address one thing that Alyssa said.
Okay.
And it's real quick. If one of my children, see, when in doubt, I always think, what would I tell my kids, right? If one of my children said to me, I don't really feel like a girl, I feel like a boy, or I don't feel like a boy, I feel like a girl, I'll be like, that's fine. That's your jam. I don't care. But on your medical work, you put what you are genetically, because they need to treat you according to your genetic sex, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody has to know but your doctor. Because if you are genetically female and you have problems, I want them to know that your cycling hormones are different and could be the cause, could be something that they should be looking into, like, I don't know, ovarian cysts or something like that,
Mhm.
So that's my opinion on that. My opinion. What I tell my kids. Now, your thing again was what can you ask me again? I apologize.
There's like this argument from certain community, like scientific community or whatever, that you can't change your gender. And I don't know if they affiliate sex and gender as like the same thing or what it is, but
Does it? Well, see, when you say change your gender, do these people really change their gender, or is their gender just developing?
right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because our gender identity it starts like when we're like 3 and 4.
Mhm.
And by then we don't have a real strong sense of male or female. We don't really understand it really, but we're starting to at that age by looking, mom and dad and whatever. Okay, and most of it has to do with our genital anatomy, like our anatomy, that we go, well, I guess I'm a boy, that's about that, right? But it isn't until we hit puberty that we really start to identify as being more compatible with the feminine or the masculine aspects related to our culture. So I don't know if, well, I can tell you right now, people can identify whatever they want, right? So people can say, you can't change gender. Like, well, I just did. So what are you going to do about that, right? I don't know. I just think it's probably a development. Now, we will talk later, and this is another good topic. When it comes to children, not adolescents. So we're talking pre-puberty or pre-adolescence, who identify as the opposite sex or the opposite gender in alignment with their genitalia. There's a lot of research that suggests that parents should accept what their children identify as, but not take any action on it. Be a passive responder, not an active one. I have a son. He says he's 6 years old. He says, I feel like a girl. Great. Let's put some testosterone blockers in you. That's when you start to hit puberty, let's put some more, and then let's give you some estrogen, and we'll do surgery. You know what happens to those children when they get older? They kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It creates such a mental breakdown from what they were going to be. Most children who identify as the opposite gender or opposite in accordance with their genitalia, where their parents get involved. Now that's the important part. Where their parents intrude, those children have a higher likelihood of suicide. Because once you do that stuff, you can't go back. And
Right.
they want to go back.
Yeah.
Haley.
Okay, well, I've heard the opposite. Like if kids, like, they're telling them they want the blockers and stuff, what happens like when they do mature, like, and then they have their deep voices, and then they can't do anything about it, and then they get really depressed, and
Okay.
that's the only one I know. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of psychologists are of the mind that by intervening medically, biologically like that, it's actually a form of child abuse, because the overwhelming majority of children, once they hit puberty, it's like 80 some percent or something, they change their mind.
I have a thing. May
So
I
really, you are absolutely, I totally get what you're saying. So I think the idea is what the psychologists were saying, the APA was saying, was to not do anything until they reach puberty and then have those conversations.
Because of moratorium, right? Because I mean, we don't even really have our identity until we've gone
Right.
through trying a bunch of our identities to
That's
find
right.
out who we really. Right.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I don't have the answers. I don't. But Kaylee noted that if you don't take action, but you're also mentioning it when it's puberty has begun also. So the American Psychological Association said prior to puberty, take no action. Because once they hit puberty, that's when they change their mind. Does that make sense? So if they're still hanging on to it after puberty has started, then you can hold those conversations, they say. Then you can start talking about testosterone blockers and estrogen supplements and things like that. Okay. Okay. We're on the same page. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with what you read. Okay. All right. Gender identity.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, you know what? I've given up on finishing this chapter today. That's fine. I don't care. I'd rather do this. This is more fun for me.
I was talking to my trans friend a couple years ago, and she was saying, like, because she went on estrogen and was trying to look like extra feminine and stuff, and she was telling me, like, if society would just accept that, like, I could look like a dude and feel like a woman, like, that would be okay, and I wouldn't have to go through all this. And it made me start to think about, like, are gender roles, like, so restrictive? Like, is that, like, one of the main influences on people feeling like they need to transition physically? Like, I have to look hyper feminine to be accepted as a woman, or hyper masculine. I'm just wonder.
Yeah, Tommy, I'm not going to make it up, and I'm going to guess, but I'm telling you it's a guess. The answer to that is I don't think that's as common as people just wanting to look the sex they feel. I think people want to do that for themselves for the most part.
Yeah. No, I agree.
But the point is noted. The gender roles, the gender expectations, all of it, right? Now that girlfriend of yours, she's starting to feel pressure that women have been feeling forever, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
That's, you say welcome to the sisterhood? I don't know. It's like, yeah, I don't know why you did it, because it sucks on this side. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I got. Sorry. Okay. So gender identity to which sense we belong to, transgender to having a gender identity that is discordant with one's anatomical sex. Gender role, the expression of gender identity in social behavior. Okay, how much of our gender roles are nature? How much of them are nurture? A lot of people want to say the only reason why men act the way they do is because our culture taught them that way. The only reason why women act the way they do is because our culture taught them that way. That's not true. That's not true. And the reason we know that is our culture. The reason we know that is because we see it universally, first of all. It's culturally universal. When something's culturally universal, it means it's ingrained. To the degree, though, to the degree of its expression, how we express it, that's different, right? Right down to aggression, physical aggression, okay? We see that men in every known culture are more physically aggressive than women, okay? But we see that some women in some cultures, like Australian women, are more aggressive than the men in Sweden. So, but the women in Australia are less aggressive than the men. And the women in Australia and the women in Sweden are less aggressive than the men in Sweden. So what does it mean? It means that we have a predisposition to develop certain things. But our culture dictates to what degree. It's like toys, right? We talked about toy preferences. It's like that. maternal instinct. Women have it. Men really don't.
I have this bad thing happening with my kid where he's like obsessed with shooting games because his dad plays them and he likes violent things.
Okay.
So like this information, should I worry a little bit less about that because he's a male and has predisposition towards such aggression and like need for physical outlet of his energy? I mean, he runs and plays all the time. He's just sometimes it's just very violent. And
okay, there's a difference between violence and aggression. Violence is when you've broken the code where there's a tit for tat. So violence is when you've gone beyond what was called for. For example, I could say that I don't like your face, and you could say, you know what, I don't like your face. I could say, you know, I'm gonna punch you. And you say, I'm gonna punch you, and I punch you in the arm, and you punch me in the arm. That's not violent. That's aggressive, because we went tit for tat. We kept within the boundaries. Violence is if I just walked up to you and punched you in the arm for no reason. You had no idea it was coming, nothing like that. Now, that said, do kids do that? Of course they do. I got my 14-year-old daughter right here who's always picking on her siblings, constantly poking at them and teasing them. Not punching them, but teasing them, right? That's normal. That's normal. So I guess I would wonder like if these violent video games that you're talking about, how violent are they? Are they like ripping heads?
Like Call of Duty. Like since he started playing video games because of, you know, 5. Since he started playing video games, I had made it specific, saying I don't want him to be shooting people in the head in the video game, which is I think it's reasonable.
I think
which like play Minecraft, kill a couple creepers, cool.
Right,
dude,
that's what I was gonna say.
Why do you have to be playing Call of Duty? But he wants.
It looks cooler. It looks cooler. It looks more real.
That's not good.
No, it is good. Everybody wants better graphics. Everybody wants better graphics. I don't know. You know what I would do? I would tell his dad to stop playing in front of his son. And then I did ask him. I said, why don't you play Minecraft and make it seem funner to him? Or why don't you play like Sonic and make that seem fun? Because all he ever sees you doing is shooting people in the head and going, woo, and getting all excited. And he's practicing for when he's older. That's what he says when I ask him, like, well, why do you like the violent games? And he's like, well, I'm practicing for when I can play them when I'm older because daddy plays them. Oh,
and dad has so much fun.
He's just using his father as a model. I completely appreciate it. I get where you're coming from, but if that's the case, if he just outright told you, so I can be like dad.
Yeah.
So I would. Yeah. I wouldn't.
But it comes out in things like he'll punch his little cousin in the stomach or threaten.
Acceptable. Right. Do they do that? You know? Do they just go up and punch people in the stomach?
Well, they'll say things like, I don't want to play the game that you want to play. But then he like goes way overboard and does things like punch her in the stomach because they don't want to play the game he wants to play. And I'm like, Max, dude.
Yeah. Mad Max.
Where did that come from? Why do you want to play with the knife toy instead of like every other toy in the room, you know?
Yeah, our preferences change over time. I'm not saying you shouldn't be alarmed, and I'm not saying that you should be alarmed. I'm saying that I think this happens more often than not.
Well, that would be a good thing. Like, because I mean, my family's all like that too, and
okay,
uncle wrestles.
Not a therapy session. We're not gonna do it. Right. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that we stay somewhat. You understand? Okay. All right. Men and women differ in a variety of cognitive and personality traits. Men outperform women in some visual spatial skills like rotating three-dimensional objects, target accuracy, and navigation. But women typically outperform men on some memory tasks like locating objects. So true. Fine manipulation, like fine motor movements, and some verbal skills like verbal fluency. Now, anecdotally, meaning this is my personal experience, 100%, except this is between my wife and I. She's definitely better at locating objects, definitely better with fine manipulations, definitely better with verbal skills and verbal fluency. But She's also better at target shooting than me, so it's like, all right, I'll just give that up too. And she's also better at navigation, I'd say. I don't know about the three-dimensional objects. We'll have to try that one out. Let's see. But she's just better at me at everything. Whatever. Chalk it up. All right. It happens, you know. It's like, it's not a competition. Although I do know the difference. Personality. What is personality? A collection of mental and behavioral traits, especially those related to emotions and attitudes that characterize an individual. It's something that makes you distinctive. Something that these traits that are distinctive, that are unique, that are truly you, and they're pretty stable over time. We know that males are more verbally and physically aggressive. They commit more violent crimes, and they enjoy thing-related activities. Females are more relationally aggressive, gossip. They enjoy people-related activities. Is this true for all men? No. Is this true for all women? No. And I don't want to have to say that every time I bring something like this up. We're saying research shows that greater than chance would predict women are more likely, men are more likely. Okay. Any comments to that?
Not yet.
I'm into it if you want to do it. Go, Kaylee. Hit me.
No, I just have something just to say. Like, why do you say males are more aggressive, and we say it's to do with the toys, right? Why are trucks more like aggressive then? Why do boys go to trucks and stuff and like cars? Why are they
boys or men?
Because they're things, not people.
Boys.
Like dolls represent people.
Right.
And babies.
Right. Because they can be moved. Boys like things that can physically move.
I didn't really play with Barbies. I didn't really like.
Same.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I was just wondering. So it really is just to do with the brain, that it's something to do with cultural things. Because I feel like I know people that would never get a boy a doll, so they wouldn't even know like if they liked it or not. Like it's only trucks, cars, isn't that?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Culture will determine what you can get.
Okay.
But it won't determine what you want.
All right. Yeah.
Right?
So that's where the other part comes in.
So that's the upbringing. Yep. And so there are going to be exceptions, because even if your parents were like, Kaylee, why don't you don't play with these cars, right? You could still want to play with those cars, trucks, and stuff. You could still, that could be your thing.
Yeah.
We call them tomboys, right? They're feminine, they're girls, but as kids, they like to play with stereotypical boy things.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're transgendered or homosexual or any of those things. Right.
That's what I mean. Like that's how it's usually seen. Like if you see a girl playing with a truck, oh, you think something's wrong with them or something.
You really don't do that with girls, though. We do it with boys, not girls.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just saying in general.
Typically, we're far more lenient with our daughters than we are our sons. Yeah.
Oh, not from what I know personally speaking, but.
Oh, really?
Then, yeah. So different, I guess. Yeah, like you said, obviously different.
There's your background. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a man's world in some houses. I know. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Check. Sorry.
I'm just telling you that's how I interpreted it. That's why I wanted to ask the question. So.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
Perfect. Often you have your own answers, Kaylee. You're just looking for confirmation.
Yeah, like what you have to say, because I don't really know what. Like that's why I'm here. So.
Yep. Understood. So we're going to stop on this slide, and basically, what is it showing? It's showing that we have differences in
motivation.
Yes, that's the answer. Whoever said that, motivation. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to stop recording.